Hola chicos, hoy tenemos un vídeo muy especial porque voy a entrevistar a Philip Koskinas, el director de Vanguard, director del sistema de anti-cheat de Riot Games. Para el que no sepa qué es Vanguard, pues es una persona con un alto cargo dentro del equipo y a raíz de un tuit que puse hace mucho tiempo me surgió esta oportunidad de poder hablar con él. Nos va a resolver muchas dudas, yo le voy a preguntar todo lo que me pusisteis vosotros en un tuit que puse después y ya veréis que os va a explotar la cabeza porque ni yo sabía todas las cosas que tienen que hacer y es muy pero que muy interesante.
Recently, a streamer from the Spanish community tweeted that a lot of people disappeared from the leaderboard. I mean, we don't know exactly what happened, but I suppose that it's because a lot of people got banned.
They went to sleep. No, yeah, it is because they get banned. I mean, the fun part about that is that sometimes actually that mechanism has failed in the past, but whenever we suspend somebody, actually for any reason, it doesn't just have to be anti-cheat, but for the duration of their suspension, they're ineligible to appear on the leaderboard. In the case that you were referring to, it was because the majority of them were using DMA cheats. DMA here stands for direct memory access, and it's such a popular method for first-person shooters and tactical shooters to exfiltrate memory to a second PC via something like a PCIe card that leverages DMA to read physical memory directly. It's one of the ways that you can gain an advantage through usually ESP means. Usually you use it to exfiltrate memory for the purposes of identifying where the player objects are, so you can read, you have the enemy player positions. Then you usually on like a second PC will render a radar, or sometimes they'll use like a fuser to recreate a skeletal overlay on the main monitor, an HDMI fuser, so that they can have an overlay that's like not on the host, detectable by Vanguard. But yeah, it's a particularly popular method of cheating for pro players. And one of the reasons that you see them get on the leaderboard and then get removed is because our bans for DMA devices are actually on a cadence. It's a hardware cheat, so it's like fairly sophisticated in a lot of ways, and it's not something we can iterate against infinitely. So our bans have to be somewhat delayed. We have a technology called DMA Guard that will kind of scrutinize the reads that are coming from the PCIe cards and determine whether or not they should be disabled. But because that surface is instant, like the cheater immediately knows whether or not their DMA card is detected, they can iterate against it with continuously, which eventually allows them to circumvent the prevention. So that's kind of why we push the response that the cheaters receive further to the right on a timeline of like detection and response. We spend a lot of times passively detecting DMA and then actioning it on a 1 to 2 week cadence. And a lot of that is because we don't want them to understand the detection, but even more of it is because we like to drive like dissent within the DMA cheating community, because a lot of developers work off of credibility. Amongst the top 100 or top 250, it's usually DMA cheats. I would say 90% of them.
You could say it's cyclical then, no? Because
Yes,
they,
definitely.
they try to do something about it, and then you guys do your thing, but it takes a little bit of time. So there's periods of time where there's more cheaters, and then there's periods of times where you ban them and the queues are more clean than before.
Yes, it is cyclical, especially for that DMA vector that we just spoke about. And there are moments where the queues are the cleanest they'll ever be. This is not the pattern we used for all cheating vectors. It's just the really, really expensive premium cheats that we action this way, because the developers are fairly, well, I don't want to say sophisticated because that feels like that gives them too much credit, but it is a vector that we don't have infinite surface to detect them on, so we don't want to exhaust our supply of vectors, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
If we did that from the beginning of Valorant, there would be thousands of like customizable firmwares that we really would have a lot of we would expedite our DMA timeline. This sounds kind of crazy, but we kind of know how this game ends. We're gonna have to start to put pages of Valorant memory into like a secure range that is protected by like a low-level hardware feature, and that low-level hardware feature is something that is not quite yet permeated. It's not enabled within the community to a sufficient degree. Like a good example is like TPM 2.0 and Secure Boot, these low-level hardware features that we leverage on Windows 11. And actually we were required of accounts that are fairly risky. We would start to do a similar low-level enforcement for specific accounts and hardwares that present a lot of risk. We're trying to delay having to get there because we want to be able to make as many players able to play Valorant as is possible. But to completely prevent the vector, the PC must eventually become a console, if that makes sense. Like, It has to be locked down to the degree that you aren't afforded the freedom to introspect memory externally. I know that sounds kind of like intense, but it's like we don't want to we're in this spot where we kind of have to defend Windows from itself, and we've done that pretty successfully, or defend the Valorant game client from what could be a cheat hiding within Windows. And we don't want to expedite our timeline to the point where like every single cheater has a PCIe card, or they're like they're attacking the game client from outside of the operating system. So to avoid getting there sooner, to that in-game sooner, we kind of delay our bans.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense for sure.
Como habéis podido ver, Philip nos dice que el DMI es muy difícil de encontrar a la gente que utiliza este tipo de cheats porque utilizan un sistema diferente al normal. Normalmente cuando tú te pones un cheat lo instalas dentro de tu ordenador, pero con el DMI utilizan cosas que son exteriores y pasan el cheat a través de un dispositivo que no es el ordenador principal. Por lo tanto, Vanguard no lo detecta directamente y tardan un poquito más en banear a este tipo de cheats. Es difícil encontrarlos, pero están haciendo todo lo que pueden y ha habido muchísimos bans últimamente. Y precisamente por esto le pregunté si los bans, ¿qué tipo de bans son? ¿Permanentes? ¿Pueden volver a jugar?
Are these bans permanent or there are different penalties for each ban?
No, they're all permanent. We have a zero tolerance policy for cheating. We actually experimented with temporary bans. I don't know if this interests y'all, but because we were also the anti-cheat team that did League of Legends, we A/B tested where we gave some cheaters a 3-month suspension and we gave some a year, or we gave some 3 months and we gave some permanent. The percentage of those that reoffended within the 3-month group within a 6-year time range was about 91%. It's absurdly high. Reforming from cheating, and I speak from experience, sorry, is not easy. You need a very long break. If you just like re-engage with the game again, especially when the majority of your friends are cheating, we kind of just kick you into a community of other addicted cheaters. And then the way you engage with Valorant is only cheating. So we found that the most successful thing is to do the hardest possible punishment from the get-go. And that forces this longer break, which makes you reevaluate your relationship with Valorant. We've noticed that the longer the break, the more likely that a hardware when it returns, both because maybe they sold it or maybe the player gave it to a sibling. But in any case, when that hardware returns, it is generally more trustworthy than when we banned it. And that's why we kind of almost always do permanent suspensions for accounts.
Aquí Philip nos comenta que ellos cuando banean a los cheaters intentan hacer que con el software o hardware que hayan utilizado no puedan volver otra vez, es decir, hacen una actualización en Vanguard para que la gente lo tenga muchísimo más difícil y que pase un break largo en el que los cheaters tengan que buscar una nueva forma de entrar y muy probablemente en otros juegos sea mucho más fácil que en Valorant y se replanteen un poco si quieren seguir cheateando en Valorant o irse a un juego que es muchísimo más fácil.
When someone reports a player for cheating, what triggers Vanguard to investigate a player further? Is it automatically flagged and analyzed by Vanguard, or does someone from the Vanguard team manually review the report?
Honestly, the Vanguard team is not large enough to hand review every single report for cheating, but we do care about them deeply. What we do is we aggregate player reports, and they're actually weighted based on the accuracy of the reporter. What that means is that if you are really good at identifying cheaters, like your reports are on average more accurate, those will inevitably count for more in our reviewing queue. So we prioritize our manual reviews based on this risk score, which is a composite score of a lot of features, but one of the most prevalent is a weighted reporter score. Once something's risk score has gotten higher, and a risk score could be anything from like you're playing from new hardware to you're being reported a lot, not having MFA enabled. This hardware showed up from nowhere, it's getting 80% headshots, it's been reported 12 times, that's gonna trigger our report queue, like it's going to end up in our queue very fast. That's when we actually schedule a lot of the auditing. Like when something is considered sufficient risk, that's when Vanguard does its highest level of scrutiny. It's actually all orchestrated. The level of scrutiny, actually even the level of data that is collected, is almost entirely based on the risk of the account and of the hardware that is playing Valorant. So if it's a new account on new hardware and it's getting reported a lot, then we're scheduling all of the anti-cheat. We're doing as many checks to like both internal Valorant functions to make sure they haven't been hooked, to running every signature scan we possess for like our repository of cheats. And then if action is taken or an asset is discovered that is interacting with Valorant in a specific way, it'll get added to a sort of deny list of assets that will flag accounts moving forward.
Aquí Philip nos comenta algo muy interesante porque dice que es muy importante reportar bien a los cheaters porque tienes una puntuación de fiabilidad. La cantidad de cheaters que tú hayas reportado que hayan acabado siendo cheaters hace que tus reportes sean muchísimo más significativos y te hagan muchísimo más caso. No os recomiendo que reportéis a todo el mundo que creáis que es mejor que vosotros, porque entonces vuestra cuenta tiene muy poca fiabilidad.
On TikTok and Twitch, you get a lot of promotions, even on YouTube ads of cheats that you can download. Why is that getting allowed as much as it is?
A lot of the cheats on TikTok are we call it shovelware, but it's like perma-detected internal, usually like one click to download. You are functionally downloading a ban, but that's irrelevant to the users that are streaming it. They're just trying to get link revenue, and they're trying to get every download they can or every subscriber they can for this cheats. And it might not surprise you to learn that the majority of cheat developers aren't what you would call like scrupulous. Like they don't have a high commitment to marketing ethics, so a lot of their advertising is pre-recorded footage, or like they're streaming on a delay. Honestly, sometimes they just stream themselves getting banned. Like actually, that's actually probably the most common, is if you tune into a live stream for a TikTok cheater, oftentimes if you watch long enough, they're gonna get banned. I don't even think some of them imply that you're not going to get banned. They're just demonstrating how impactful rage hacking can be, almost like a spectacle. Even though we ban the majority of the software on as fast as makes sense given the sophistication of the vector, it doesn't really inhibit them in any way from streaming on TikTok. Even if we were to go the legal route where we try to issue strikes against the content that's posted, I mean, they can just rejoin the platform. TikTok has an algorithm that tries to maximize like engagement with both for the person viewing and the person uploading, and one of those things seems to prioritize live streams from new accounts, especially those that are like tagged with Valorant. We also don't really want players to fall victim to this stuff, like paying $19 just to get banned. It's like, it's poisonous when you think everybody's cheating, because then you're more willing to cheat yourself. It's so easy to create an account these days. Like somebody can get back onto the TikTok platform very fast. Even if their team takes action, and they do, they'll have another live stream up and running within hours. It's all like super detected stuffs.
Aquí en esta parte estuvimos comentando lo que veis vosotros por TikTok. Muchas veces estoy streameando y me avisáis, ¿hay alguien streameando cheats en TikTok? He visto esos streamings y le he preguntado sobre el tema, y él sobre todo lo que dice es que estos streamers son baneados con muy poco tiempo de duración, y además muchas veces están poniendo una grabación, ni siquiera es un streaming en directo, y que lo hacen para que la gente se descargue su cheat pagando X dinero, muy poco, y básicamente es una trampa, porque el cheat que te están vendiendo ya lo ha cubierto Vanguard, y en cuanto te lo instales te van a banear la cuenta. Por lo tanto, están timando a todo el mundo que ve el streaming y se están riendo de la gente. Así que cuidado con eso. Ya de por sí no os tendríais que poner cheats, y muchísimo menos si vienen de TikTok.
I have a question that I guess a lot of people wanna know. What is the currently most commonly used cheat, and are you aware of the KM box cheat?
Yeah, the most commonly used cheat, and this is kind of insane to me, is something called an internal pixel bot. What that means is that there's an application on the machine running Valorant that is reading the screen and trying to submit usually just clicks. A trigger bot, I think, is what the community calls it.
Yeah.
So it's just trying to determine if an outline has entered the reticle, and then it fires. The fact that it's reading the screen locally is something that's very visible to Vanguard. So it is something that will eventually get you banned, but trigger bots are not a large concern for the team, because admittedly, if you're not good at the game, you can't really use them. So like most cheaters suck. If you're limited to only a trigger bot and you're not able to play Valorant at even a basic level,
very
you're not going to
obvious.
get a lot of advantage. And then the second most common is actually what you brought up. Is actually they use an Arduino. It's basically like we call them external pixel bots. A lot of what goes on there is they're injecting input into the host in a way that has to masquerade itself as the primary mouse for the computer. Vanguard has a lot of techniques that only allow input from one device, and cheaters already know all this stuff. They'll use an external KM box or Arduino that the mouse is connected to, and they do something called USB pass-through, but they basically try to emulate through the KM box any call that the operating system could make to the mouse to appear as legitimate as possible. That device, the KM box, it's combining input from both the mouse and the aimbot to get input into Valorant in a way that just looks like it's coming from one source. Okay, sometimes they install OBS locally and stream the center 300 pixels to a computer, like a second PC, but some players also will use something like an HDMI splitter or a capture card to get the input to a second PC, which then scrutinizes the screen to identify the opponent head. Then it will instruct the Arduino or the KM box to issue aim updates that are like slowly well, not slowly, but they'll bump the aim to the opponent's outline, usually the head. I actually don't want to give away some of the juiciest detection methods for this stuff, but because of the way that, like, I'm describing, like, human input and automated input kind of arguing with each other as they try to update aim in game. It is very, very visible to both server-sided behavioral modeling and input modeling locally. Like, it is very visible that it is not a human aiming.
Bajo mi experiencia, ya lo habéis visto durante los streamings, yo no me suelo quejar mucho de cheaters, pero normalmente cuando lo hago es cheater al 100%. Eso es porque llevo jugando mucho tiempo a nivel profesional y me doy cuenta de detalles que no tienen sentido a la hora de cómo juega el contrincante. Cuando estás jugando piensas que te va a hacer el enemigo en relación a la información que ha podido obtener. Cuando el enemigo justamente hace una jugada perfecta con ningún tipo de información, ahí se me activa a mí en el cerebro una alerta que dice: esto ha sido raro, y sigo jugando para corroborar que es raro de verdad. Y normalmente cuando ya pasan 3 o 4 veces eso, me doy cuenta de que esa persona muy probablemente tenga más información de la que debería tener normalmente y que lleva cheats. Luego también se puede ver a nivel mecánico. Hay gente que hace unos microajustes rarísimos que no son nada normales. No es lo que haría un ser humano. Últimamente están saliendo muchos cheats que se acercan a la cabeza y luego se mueve hacia la persona. Esos son mucho más fáciles de saber si no tienes experiencia, porque lo puedes ver simplemente con tus propios ojos. Normalmente suelo reportar poco, pero mi rating dentro de la fiabilidad de mis reportes es muy alto, seguro.
The problem kind of arises from something I was describing before, is that we need a lot of aim samples to be certain. So when you cheat this way, with the KM box, you are completely invisible to Vanguard on the PC. We're talking about a cheat that is sitting totally outside of the computer that's running Valorant. Even if you're using a capture card, Vanguard might be able to see it, but how do I know you're not just like the most popular streamer in Spain? So we can't just disable all capture cards. We can't prevent all capture of the game window. So we have to allow it to be exfiltrated, which opens us up to this vector where people can classify the screen and update aim. And a lot of the detection vectors for that, or the only remaining detection vector for that, is behavioral machine learning on the input, well, the in-game directional, like where you're facing in game.
Yeah, the things that make you aware that he's cheating are probably like really weird micro adjustments that are not humanly possible, or things like this.
Yes, it's basically micro adjustments that are very obviously inhuman. And like in our lab, like we haven't managed to test any with any amount of humanization that are totally undetected, just based on your tuning parameters. Like if you really dumb down your aimbot, it's going to take us longer to be certain, because we really, really, really don't ever want to ban a pro player. Sometimes it's almost cheating, but it's just like, man, they really, like, lucky flicks here and there are like the bread and butter of a lot of pro players, and they've labbed it. So it takes a minute for us to be certain that it's not a...
Yeah, you need to connect some dots. You need to connect background, how many games has he played, if he probably climbed the ladder super fast all of a sudden and stuff like this, or that doesn't matter that much.
It doesn't matter for what the model predicts. In a lot of cases, you're right. Cheaters gain a lot of MMR very fast. But if we relied on that within the model, we would create a situation where, Counter-Strike pros that join the game would be getting detected. Because you're right, 99% of cheaters would have suddenly skyrocketing MMRs on new accounts, and the model would overfit to that. So we don't give it that information. We look only at the input. When it comes to how that model's output is interpreted, we do use how quickly you're gaining MMR.
En esta parte de la entrevista nos comenta algo muy interesante, y es cómo separar la diferencia que hay entre un pro player y un cheater. Él dice que está muy cerca el nivel de un pro player al de un cheater a la hora de disparar. Es una barbaridad lo que somos capaces de hacer algunos de los jugadores que llevamos mucho tiempo. Sobre todo, imaginaos, no sé, Tenz o Cancan, o jugadores que son increíbles y que tienen jugadas absolutamente brillantes. Y la gran diferencia es que los movimientos y los microajustes siguen siendo buenísimos, pero son humanos, son mucho más lógicos y mucho más posibles de hacer. Los cheaters hacen movimientos que no son nada normales, como por ejemplo acercarse a la cabeza, fallar, y justo cuando va a apretar el clic se mueve instantáneo y hace una corrección muy pequeña, que eso no suele hacerla un pro player. El pro player mueve la mirilla y el microajuste a la vez para ya irle a dar directamente. El sistema de Vanguard tiene un sistema en el que es capaz de notar este tipo de anomalías que no son normales. Es decir, ellos te pueden llegar a traquear los movimientos que tú haces, y dependiendo de cómo te has movido, pues ahí salta una red flag y te meten en una investigación.
From my experience, every time I play against a cheater or with a cheater, he has an account where he played for several seasons really bad and then he starts cheating. It's not like I see many accounts that are cheating from the start, you know what I mean?
Well, cheaters usually need accounts, right? They need accounts in good standing because like we were talking about before with the risk system, if you join on a totally new account from totally new hardware, you're getting a lot of scrutiny from the anti-cheat. A cheater today in North America or Europe, they cannot enable their firmware TPM on their machine. And they can't do that because it's banned. To get into game, they have to avoid tripping the system that would be like enable your TPM, because once that's required for that account or for that hardware, they would be unable to play. And then the second reason is, I wouldn't say this is a large percentage of cheating, but a lot of boosters use cheats. So when you pay somebody to rank you up, sometimes they'll use cheats to do it. You know, they have normally poor performance and then a sudden burst of raw aiming energy. Most cheaters in Valorant aren't ever going to play the game fairly. Like, they cheat in CSGO, they cheat in Valorant, they just cheat. Like, it's how they engage with games. Once we've removed them, they have to find another way back in. And the most convenient method right now, and honestly probably for a while, is to get an account that is already baked, I should say.
A year ago, it was shared that only 1% of the matches involved cheaters. Is this number still accurate?
We've been as high as like 2%, and we've been as low as like 0.5%. We've had really good years. It depends on where in our detection and response we are. But if you average it over every year, yeah, we usually hover around 1%. And right now, I would say it is below 1%. There are some regions where, and we called this out in a previous article, where the permeation of technology like KMBox and Arduinos make cheating a little more prevalent. Because a lot of that stuff has to be detected behaviorally, it means they can influence more games. The regions that are adapting to Vanguard faster by going to external, those regions have a slightly higher infection rate, or matches that have at least one cheater in them.
Aquí nos comenta que dependiendo de la región hay más cheaters que en otras regiones, y además los cheats son diferentes. Por ejemplo, en Brasil es una de las regiones que más cheaters hay, pero cheaters de baja calidad que son fáciles de banear. Y por ejemplo también nos comenta que en España se utiliza mucho el DMA, lo que os he explicado antes, el sistema de hardware exterior que hace que sea un poquito más difícil de encontrar al cheater. Y dependiendo de la región pues cambia un poquito, ¿no? Supongo que también tiene que ver lo barato que sea, la tecnología que puedes llegar a tener. Luego le pregunté él sobre el porcentaje de cheaters que hay en el juego, el famoso 1%, y nos dice él que de normal están en ese 1%, pero que actualmente es más bajo del 1%. Hemos comentado que es cíclico. Hay cheaters que sacan cheats nuevos y que de repente hay una ola de cheaters muy grande que hace que suba el porcentaje, encuentran la manera de banearlos a todos, vuelve a bajar, y por eso hay temporadas en las que nos encontramos muchísimos más cheaters de lo normal y luego otras en las que no tantos. Es cíclico, es suerte, y hay temporadas malas y temporadas mejores.
Is it possible to have a multiplayer game, shooter game without cheats? Because I've been playing for so long and I've never played one without cheats.
Not with the way we do skill expression today. And this sounds pessimistic, but it's not. I think we'll always have people on this side of the fight, and we're actually even finding partnership within Windows for specific individuals who really want to play games without cheaters. And honestly, that's where I find inspiration, is in people who also want to play games without cheaters. What Vanguard proved is that cheaters can be driven off the host. They're not running cheats locally that read game memory or anything, because that particular vector of cheating we can solve through the means that Windows has made available to us. I'll give an example of a perfectly secure environment. Well, perfectly secure right now. The recent generation of Xbox has not been jailbroken. You cannot introspect memory or do injection, or there's no internal method to cheat on a console, yet there are still cheats on console. And the way they do it is very similar to the KMBox. They use a device called a Zim to basically map their mouse and keyboard input to a joystick, which allows them to play console with mouse and keyboard. And if you've ever played console, you'll know that playing a mouse would be an absurd advantage in Valorant. The fact that so much cheating is based on reading the screen or on getting input that is not human into the game, and given how quickly that space is advancing, like how fast people are able to create input maps that look closer and closer to either analog input in the event of the console or humanized mouse input in the case of the PC. Cheaters blow my mind with what they're willing to do. Imagine we did a tested input. So like, you know, you had to have an official mouse to play Valorant. What cheaters would do is they'd get that official mouse. They will put like an LCD screen under there that instruments the diodes of the mouse, like literally the optical sensors of the mouse. And they will bake mouse input through those. They will always find a way to fake or mechanically, like on a joystick, they might even literally with a motor move the joystick. But on a mouse, it would more likely be something that would interfere with the laser on the mouse. My point is basically they would find a way to instrument their input. So no, for games that use input as skill determination, I don't think we will always be in the spot where we have to kind of detect it through this cat and mouse game, but we will always have to do that. For some game genres though, like strategy games that have full server authority, full server simulation,
Like
it is the
TFT
case
or,
that
or something like this.
yes.
Yeah.
So TFT or LoL, I'll use those examples. Input isn't as large an advantage, right? Like the ability to automate input isn't where the skill is determined within the game. So in Valorant, if you are aimbotting, you could get your win rate to 100%. If a perfect aimbot could totally dominate the game. But in League of Legends, scripting can only win you about 18% more games on average. You can't get as much value out of purely input means on a strategy game. But for the games that you enjoy, those will probably always see attacks that are increasingly mechanical. We have to be pretty forgiving with the Fog of War in Valorant. We have to give your client more information than we want to give it, and a lot of that's because of the design of the game. There are characters in Valorant that can teleport. So to avoid somebody just popping out of nowhere because based on network latency, we have to give your client a little more information than we're supposed to. This also includes the sound, the footsteps. We have to send it literally the object's position. And that creates this opportunity for cheaters to inspect memory. And no matter what level of obfuscation we have, eventually it has to be decrypted for Unreal. And they will find the object's position and render it. And that is, it's called an ESP cheat, but that is something that is kind of exclusive to first-person shooters that have that, well, I mean, the thing that we love, the react, like you have to react to information you see. AI input, even as they approach a humanized curve, there is still signal in the fact that they're trying to perform outside human means. Your aimbot is only as good as the average semi-professional player. Like, you can't be any better than that. We ban 15,000 accounts a day. It's absurd.
15,000?
It's absurd.
Like
Yes.
globally?
Globally, yeah. And that might seem like not a lot, but that is just, by percentage and by it's an absurd number. That's only accounts that get into game. It doesn't include all the harbor bans that are restricted and still trying. It doesn't include all the times we flag somebody and force them to enable TPM. It's only the accounts that get into game and are banned.
It's funny because my next question was how many cheaters have been banned this year, but I can do the math.
Ahora viene otra parte muy interesante y es que ¿por qué no se banea instantáneo al cheater cuando entra a la partida y pasan varias partidas? Él dice que de media son 6. Veamos la explicación que nos da.
There are certainly cheats that will just ban you instantly because we've noticed that the developer isn't a developer that's not even there, like they're completely offline, will just ban you instantly. But if you're using a paid cheat and the developer is iterating, we don't want to ban your entire user base instantly.
You collect more information so you can really damage the people that are doing the cheat. You want to ban all of them and also know exactly how he does it, so it's harder for him to do something else.
Yes, that is true at the top end, like the ones that we're giving a lot of time to, we are collecting information. Imagine a premium cheat that costs like $50. I think the average cheat cost on Valorant is somewhere around $70. But imagine this cheat that you have that is like $50 to $60. It's got a user cap. You got into the Discord, you got the cheat. That cheat developer is willing to release updates, right? If I ban every user that buys that instantly, they'll just go hunting for something else. The cheaters aren't going away.
I see.
That cheat developer is going to keep iterating. Especially for internal cheats, it's a deny list. There's vectors they have to utilize to read Valorant memory for an internal cheat. And all those are identifiable, but they require us to kind of carve a space around all the known third-party applications that are technically permitted to do it. You know, when it's added to the deny list, the faster they go searching for their next big fix, they may find something that is undetected, truly undetected, or at least that we don't know about yet. And that would be worse than just giving them just enough games to delay that developer's iteration. So we deliberately delay it. That's actually a hard concept to get across to player, especially when you're encountering a cheater, because we get that. We're like, just get him out of the game. Why do I have to even... And that's kind of like why we did ranked rollbacks, is because we know we can't go much faster. If we ban every single detection method we make instantly, all of them will get bypassed. We approach about 6 games in our median time to detection. And the reason we approach that is because that's just how fast our team is capable of being. And it is the lowest in the industry. They are ravenous for cheaters. It won't get much lower without an investment that would exceed the output. If you doubled Anti-Cheat's budget, it would not have that time to detection. It would shave maybe 15% off, right? And if you doubled it again, it wouldn't have that remainder. It would shave maybe 10% off. It's like, you know, it's a logarithmic function.
Aquí nos comenta que Riot Games se gasta una barbaridad de dinero en Vanguard para que podamos jugar de la mejor manera posible, y también nos dice que aunque doblen el presupuesto, tampoco se van a banear tantos más cheats de lo normal. Se banearía un 15% más o un 10% más, pero no sería el doble o el triple. El dinero no es un problema, como nos dice Philip, sino toda la gente que quiere saltarse el sistema y abusar de la gente que juega normal como nosotros.
I never complain about the cheaters because I've been playing for a long time, and in CS there's many more. And I know that you guys are doing a good job. But I tweeted last time because I felt like there was way more than normal. I tweeted out of frustration, but I wanted to say to your team as well that I know that they are doing a really good job. It's not like I only see the bad things, you know?
Well, I'll make sure they know. We have a lot of competitive players on the team too. In some cases, like they are motivated solely because they have encountered cheaters, and probably not too dissimilar from yourself. Like they've encountered cheaters and they're like, I will not have this in my games. And they've joined up only to take up the noble cause. And obviously we have other teammates who have developed cheats in their past, and they utilize their knowledge of both Windows and of Valorant to develop detection vectors. Riot's risk appetite is absurd. If it means no cheaters, they will encounter way more friction than I think other studios are willing to. Honestly, because everybody on that team plays the game. Like, they just don't want to have cheaters in their games, so they're like, no, at any cost. But because they feel like players, they feel like they're able to make decisions on behalf of players, including those that they might not be willing to incur today. And one of the best examples is actually like 3 years ago when we started requiring TPM 2.0. That's like industry standard now. But back then, it was like, what the hell is Riot doing? And, and with good reason. It's like, because you're going to cut out like 5% of your player base. Are you really willing to do that? And it's like, especially amongst the Valorant leadership, they were like, at all, no cheaters at all costs. And sometimes they seem more insane than me, but I think it comes from a spot where they're so engaged with the game. Like they know better than most studios what the game they want to make, and the game they want to make has no cheaters in it. It's going to be a long fight. Yeah. It's going to be a long fight.
Aquí le hago una pregunta, chicos, que bueno, tenía muchísima curiosidad, porque él nos comenta que dentro del equipo hay gente que usó cheats anteriormente y que eran usuarios asiduos de este tipo de cosas, muchos de ellos programadores y gente muy buena en eso, que ha acabado pasándose al lado bueno para trabajar con Riot Games en Vanguard. Y mi pregunta fue, ¿cómo te aseguras que la persona que entra en tu equipo no utiliza su posición para beneficiarse?
It must be really hard to make the team on Vanguard and trust the people that work inside the team.
God, you said
like, how do you do it? To accept someone into the team, you have to really trust him. How do you do it?
Man, that is a really good question, dude. It is hard. So obviously we're hiring a lot of ex-cheaters, and a lot of them could just take advantage of the situation. But what I actually focus on is creating an environment where people can bring their best self. So like the thing that got me to stop cheating was starting to play with players who didn't. I try to extend that same mentality within the team, and it's like, if you see a behavioral example where somebody is resolute, and they're in the sense that there doesn't need to be cheaters, and you possess skills that allow you to eliminate those, you can quickly gain camaraderie within that group. I don't want to really get into it, but the same is true for like other forms of addiction. If you're in a community of people who are addicted, and cheating is an addiction, it's difficult to break that cycle. So what I try to do is I focus on creating an environment where, like, I wouldn't say it's the expectation, it's just it's a totally different thing. You see the example, and then it's easier for you to hold yourself to that behavioral example. But I'll say it is not always perfect. We take on a lot of risk being an anti-cheat team, and we try to hire from a lot of lanes of life. We've gotten it wrong a few times, and we have our system for like onboarding people has a long tail where you don't get access to the secrets until you've been around for a while. And that tends to eliminate the majority of the concern.
Is there anything else that is upcoming or that you're working on that will improve Vanguard in general? That you can say, of course, because you cannot.
Yeah, there's two big investment areas. Three, actually. One is obviously the input modeling. Like we're talking about being able to scrutinize, and like we've really ramped up our ability to both detect stuff server-sided and detect what the game client sees. I'll say that those are kind of the two vectors that we have to scrutinize input. I think that'll give us a lot of coverage into the most obvious forms of rage hacking in the immediate future. The more you tune it, the more you'll last. And that'll always be true no matter what the modeling approach is, because we have to be confident. And then there's another investment area is in the hardware identifiers. We didn't get into this much in this talk, but we have a lot of cheaters who like return. We're talking about banning 15,000 accounts a day. So we are developing, and I can say almost nothing about it, but we've developed a more intense fingerprinting methodology that is, I mean, it's more behavioral based, but it will give us the ability to expedite bans for players that are obvious repeat offenders, which is most cheaters. And in the laboratory setting, that has been incredibly promising, but we won't start rolling to live until later this year. But it's really cool. That's all I can say is it's really cool the way it works. And then the third thing is that we are looking at, so we call it the Vanguard restriction system, but internally it's known as the trust platform. But it's basically like, how much can we trust a person? So, you know, you play all the time, probably from the same machine. You're always streaming. We don't really want to do more anti-cheat to you. Like, not because also we don't want to introduce the user friction of asking you to enable things. But like we were talking about before, there are hardware features that we get a lot of advantage out of very, very soon. Like actually starting now for some regions. Restrict accounts, basically require more hardware-backed security from accounts that are playing on regions or from locations or on machines that we don't trust. And this also includes like not allowing VPNs from certain locations. And the reason for that is because, well, Riot's account security is fairly lax. We let people make an account. I don't even think you really have to verify your email. So we have to put a lot of our scrutiny onto how much we trust the location. We'll start to be able to carve out regions, like we're carving those out as areas where if you want, okay, fine, if you don't want to play from your normal location, if you want to masquerade where you're playing from, then you have to subscribe to all these things. And so the players that are using VPNs to play, outside of existing geofencing or outside of existing regional regulations, they'll still be able to. But cheaters will find it to be quite a chore. And we've actually seen a lot of promise from those systems in the regions that tend to see a lot of spillover from cheaters because of like national ID requirements for like local regulations that require national IDs for games rather than, they're already banned. They have no more national IDs remaining for their region. So they just go to another region. So we'll be able to restrict them. That's showing a lot of promise. I mean, more than a lot of promise. It's definitely like the direction we're taking Vanguard more and more is requiring more like a more stringent device posture from accounts that we don't trust.
It was a pleasure to talk to you, Philip.
You too, man. Thanks for the good questions. Thanks for making the time. I really appreciated getting to talk today.
La verdad es que después de esta conversación con Philip me ha quedado muy claro de que Vanguard es una pasada. He jugado a otros juegos shooter multijugador que están plagados de cheaters y que no tienen un sistema tan bueno como este, pero vamos, ni de cerca. Además las estadísticas son públicas, lo podéis chequear. Y creo que es difícil porque los cheaters sacan nuevas maneras y tú siempre vas un pasito por detrás y tienes que intentar capar lo que va saliendo y es prácticamente imposible que haya un 0%. De hecho, él cree que es literalmente imposible que haya un 0% en un multijugador shooter. No ha pasado y no cree que vaya a pasar, pero que van a hacer todo lo posible para que ese porcentaje sea lo menor que exista dentro del mundillo. Los cheaters últimamente, que han aparecido en mis partidas, me han hecho tener una percepción un poquito equivocada de lo que es realmente, porque hay menos de lo que nosotros creemos y hacen todo lo que pueden. Y estoy muy contento porque al menos podemos jugar la gran mayoría de las partidas sin cheaters y están haciendo un gran trabajo. Así que muy contento con la entrevista, no sé cómo lo veis vosotros desde casa, decídmelo en los comentarios un poco vuestras impresiones y ya sabemos que los cheaters van a intentar encontrar cualquier forma para que les funcionen las cosas. Así que hay los buenos contra los malos, una película interna aquí que veamos a ver quién gana.